Hello everyone. This lecture is for English Literature, Shastri Part 3rd, Paper First. Today we will study the famous poet John Keats' poem Ode to Autumn. First of all, we will know about the famous poet John Keats. John Keats was born on 31st October 1795 and he was died on 23rd February 1821 in the age of 25. John Keats was an English romantic poet. He was one of the main figures of the second generation of romantic poets, along with Lord Byron and P.B. Shelley. Despite his works having been in publication for only 4 years before his death from tuberculosis at the age of 25. Although his poems were not generally well received by critics during his lifetime, his reputation grew after his death, and by the end of the 19th century, he had become one of the most beloved of all English poets. He had a significant influence on a diverse range of poets and writers. George Louis Box states that his first encounter with Keats' works was a great experience that he felt all of his life. The poetry of Keats is characterized by a style heavily loaded with sensualities, most notably in the series of odes. This is typical of the Romantic poets, as they aimed to accentuate extreme emotion through an emphasis on natural imagery. Today, his poems and letters are some of the most popular and most analyzed in English literature. Some of his most acclaimed works are Ode to Nightingale, Sleep and Poetry, and the famous sonnet on first looking into Chapman's Homer. Then we come on the poem Ode to Autumn. To Autumn is a poem by English romantic poet John Keats. The work was composed on 19 September 1819 and published in 1820 in a volume of Keats' poetry that included Lamia and the Eve of Saint Agnes. To Autumn is the final work in a group of poems known as Keats' 1819 Ode. Although personal problems left him little time to devote to poetry in 1819, he composed To Autumn after a walk near Winchester one autumnal evening. The work marks the end of his poetic career as he needed to earn money and could no longer devote himself to the lifestyle of a poet. A little over a year after the publication of To Autumn, Keats died in Rome. The work marks the end of his poetic career as he needed to earn money and could no longer devote himself to the lifestyle of a poet. A little over a year after the publication of To Autumn, Keats died in Rome. The poet has three 11-line stanza which describe a progression through the season from the late maturation of the crops to the harvest and to the last day of autumn when winter is nearing. The imagery is richly achieved through the personification of autumn and the description of its bounty, its sights and sounds. One of the most anthologized English lyric poems to autumn has been regarded by critics as one of the most perfect short poems in the English language. It has parallels in the work of English landscape artists, with Keats himself describing the fields of stubble that he saw on his walk as conveying the warmth of some pictures. The work has been interpreted as a meditation on death, as an allegory of artistic creation, as Keats' response to the Peterloo massacre, which took place in the same year, and as an expression of nationalist sentiment. Now we come on the original text of the poet, stanza first. Season of mist and mellow fruitfulness, close bosom friend of the maturing sun, conspiring with him how to load and bless with fruit the vines that round the thatch eve run, to bend with apples the most cottage trees, and fill all fruit with ripeness to the core, to swell the gourd and plump the hazel cells with a sweet kernel to set budding more, and still more later flowers for the beech, until they think warm days will never cease, for summer has overbrimmed their slim, clammy cells. The word meaning of the some typical words in line 2, maturing sun. Here maturing sun means the cottage plants to mature, and in line number 4, thatched means covering of a roof made of straw or cut reed. Eave, eave means overhang of roof. Then in line number 5, mossed means covered with moss. In line number 7, the word is gourd, which means family includes squash, pumpkins, and cucumbers. And the another word, which is hazel, which means the hazel tree that produced edible hazelnuts. In line number 11, the word is over, poetic, which means poetic form of over, thus the cells are overfilled. The word is cell, means honey filled cells or honeycomb in the beehive. Then we come on the paraphrase of the stanza first. Autumn, the season associated with mist and a general sense of calm, abundance. You are an intimate friend of the sun, whose heat and light helps all these fruits and vegetables grow. You work closely with the sun to make lots of fruits grow on the vines that wrap around the roof edge of the farmhouse. You work to make so much fruit grow that it weighs down the branches of the moji apple trees that grow outside the farmhouses. Together, you and the sun make every fruit completely ripe. You make gourd, swale, and hazel cells grow fat with a sweet nut inside. You make the flowers grow new buds and keep growing more. And when these buds bloom, bees gather the flowers' pollen. Those bees think your warmth will last forever because summer brought so many flowers and so much pollen that the beehives are now overflowing with honey. There is no doubt that personification is at work in this wonderfully balanced ode. From the first three lines, it is crystal clear that the sun, a male symbol associated with Apollo, the Greek god, is conspiring with a partner who is a close bosom friend of the opposite sex. This female could be Demeter, the Greek goddess of agriculture and natural fertility. They combine their energies to load, blaze, bend, fill, swell, pump, and set all the flora. Harvest time has arrived, and there is a bounty secretly produced by these powerful spirits. Not the sensuous language, the soft cons- consonant echoing M, H, and F, the contrasting short and long vowels reflecting the tension at work as the whole plant word comes to fruition. The first stanza is one long sentence taking in cosmic sun and microcosmic bee and cell building into a heaped and humming climax, onomatopoeia filling the last line. Then we come on the second stanza. Who hath not seen thee oft amid thy store? Sometimes whoever seeks abroad may find thee sitting careless on a granary floor, thy hair soft lifted by the winnowing wind, or on a half reaped fro, sound asleep, dosed with the fume of poppies, while thy hook spares the next wreath and all its twinned flowers. And sometimes, like a gleaner, thou dost keep study thy laden head across a brook, or by a cider press with patient look, thou watchest the last oozing hours by hours. Then we look some typical words of this stanza. In the line number first of this stanza, the word is store, which means an abundance, a great quantity, a storehouse or a warehouse. Then the archaic, you, Ottoman personified. Then in line number 3, granary, a storehouse for grain, often after it has been threshed. In line number 4, winnowing means to separate the chaff from the grain by fanning or by means of the wind. Then thy, archaic or your. In line number 5, fro, a cut or trench made by a plough. Poetic usage, a ploughed field. Then in line number 6, drowsed, which means made sleepy. Hook, a sickle or scythe, used a harvest grains and other crops. Then puppy, puppies used to grow in field of grain. Certain puppies are the source of opium. In line number 7, swath, which means the sweep of a scythe in moving, the path cut in one sweep of a scythe. Then the word is twinned, which means poetic form of entwined or twisted. In line number 8, the word is gleaner, which is used for a person who gathers what the reapers have left in a field. Gleaning was made illegal shortly before Keats wrote the poem in line number 10, cider press, which means apparatus that squeeze apples to make cider. Then we come on the paraphrase of this stanza. Who has not noticed you, Autumn, in the place where your bounty is kept? Any person who finds themselves wandering about is likely to find you sitting lazy on the floor of the building where grain is stored, and notice your hair lifted by a light wind that separates strands of hair in the same way a harvester might separate the components of a grain of wheat. Anyone might also find you asleep in the fields on an incompletely harvested crop row, fatigued because of the sleep, including aroma of the puppies. In that case, your scythe, which you would been you had been using to cut the crops, would be cast to the side. It would just be lying there, and therefore the next section of the twisted flowers would be saved from being cut. Sometimes, autumn, you are like the agricultural laborer who picks up loose cutting from the fields after the harvest, like this laborer who has to be observant. You watch the steam with your full heavy head of fruit and leaves. Other times, you patiently watch the machine that juices the apple for cider, nothing how the juice and pulp slowly ooze out the machine over the course of many hours. After all the hard work through the late summer months come, comes the cushion, a direct cushion based again on the imaginative sensitivity. Perhaps this female spirit, this goddess near exhaustion now relaxes even sleep. Stasis has been reached. The speaker suggests that her hair is soft lifted by winnowing wind, an alliterative onomatopoeic line that conjures up whistling or winning of horses. This female spirit overlooks various aspects of the harvest now that the reaping, threshing, and gleaning has finished. She takes her time as the apple juice ferments, not the languid, slow feel of the last line with its slow, long vowels, almost an adagio. Then we come on the third stanza. Where are the songs of spring? Are where are they? Think not of them. Thou hast thy music too. While beard clouds bloom the soft dying day and touch the subtle plains with rosy hue, then in a wailful choir the smell nuts mourn. Among the river shallows borne aloft or sinking as the light wind lives or dies, and full-grown lambs loud bleat from hilly bourne. Hedge crickets sing, and now with terrible soft the red-breast whistles from a garden cropped, and gathering swallows twitter in the skies. Then we come on some typical words in this stanza. The line number third in this stanza, the word is used bared clouds, which means thin, horizontal clouds, which resembles bar or strips. In line number 4, the word is used stubble, which means the dried stumps of wheat and other grain left after reaping. In the line number 6, the word is swallows, which means member of willowy family. Born. Then in this line, the another word is borne aloft, which means carried high. In the line number 7, the word is used born, which means domain of or realm. And in line number 8, the word is used cropped, which means a small enclosed field. Then we come on the paraphrase of the stanza third. Where is the music that characterizes spring? For example, bird song. I repeat, where is it? Don't think about the spring and its typical music. You have your own music. The background of your music is a scene in which beautiful shadowed clouds expand in the evening sky and filter the sunlight such that it casts pink upon the fields which have been harvested. Your music includes nuts which hum mournfully among the willows that grow along the river banks and which rise and fall according to the strength of the wind. It includes mature, fully grown lambs that make their bath sound from the fence of their hilly enclosure. It includes the cricket singing in the bushes and a red-breasted bird that softly whistles from a small garden. And lastly, it includes the growing flock of swallows which rise and sing together against the darkening sky. The second and the third question appear asking about the inspirational music of spring, but that enlivening season and its song have gone, replaced by a more somber music. Think not of them, is the speaker, and reassuring the female spirit that autumn too has a valid role to play in the cycle of life. There is no turning back the clock. The language of lines 25 to 29 speaks for itself. Soft dying day, wailful morn, sinking dies. Things are coming to an end, and the atmosphere is one almost of lament. The rhymes in line 29 enhance of feeling of the seasonal change about to take place. Not the spondy and the ferric alongside the lambic which alters the pace and reflects the nuts river dance and gives a little of cadence. This melancholic mid section of the final stanza has to be acknowledged, but the ending is one of inevitable renewal and positive change. The hedge cricket, the robin redbreast, and the swallows are communicating the letter about to journey south to find warmth and a new life. Then we come on some characteristics of this poem. This poem is an ode. This poem is an ode. And then we come on what is an ode? An ode is a long lyrical poem which is written in stanzic form. It is an elaborately structured poem praising or glorifying an event or individual, describing nature intellectually as well as emotionally. In an ode, the poet directly addresses the object. A classical ode is structured in three major parts: the strophe, the antistrophe, and the epode. Different forms such as the homostrophic ode and the irregular ode also enter. Thanks.